Good morning, and it's the weekly Discord discussion. This week's topic is: Are men disposable? Today we have a smaller panel than normal. We have a couple people who want to introduce themselves, starting with you, above me, ML.
Sorry. My name is Chris. I am a white collar office drone from Canada, and yeah, hopefully come off sounding a bit intelligent.
Bappo.
My name is Ahmed. I'm originally Arabic, but I migrated to Turkey to study business administration. I'm in third year.
Nice. So I'm going to start off with a couple of things that I believe to be self evident. And of course, I'm Brian. Everybody knows that because I'm the one who hosts it. Um, Men are disposable and not. I think that it is such a challenging question to actually uh, give a definitive yes or no to, as the furtherance of our species is predicated on women, not men. Uh, Men go to war first. We're the ones sent out to war. We're the ones who do all the jobs that have a risk of mortality to them. And then there's evidence that and this is one the topic I think has become really interesting, is the social aspect of men, right? So we've had 30 years of society saying to men that we're of little value. We have toxic masculinity. Men are deadbeat dads. We don't do this. We don't do that. And we took men out of the home, or we attempt, basically societally, we have devalued men in the home as every state will give custody to the female, not the male. And I think there was a statistic I heard the other day that was kind of crazy that uh, a female raised children have X amount of issues, but if it's a child raised by a man, it has basically the same outcome
Oh,
of a two parent home.
yeah. So
I
with
saw that
regards
statistic.
to it's with regard that's going around in the red pill community right now. I don't know the exact statistic. I presume it's a .gov statistic or something like that. But yeah, it purports to be that um, males raised in a single mother household have that they're like 20 times more likely to end up in jail. All the stats on that are, those are all from the government. Males raised in a single father household, um, this stat purports to say, have the same positive outcome as males raised in a two parent household. So another way of putting it is males raised in a single father household do not seem to suffer that penalty, that criminality
Yep.
penalty that males do when they're raised by a single mother. Yeah.
So that bodes to like both. And I was trying to present kind of really both arguments at the same time. Is that I think we've got evidence that men are absolutely necessary for the furtherance of our species, not just in the fact that we produce people or that we are the catalyst for reproduction. It's the aspect of our social impact is way more valuable than our current society is deeming. So Bappo, what do you think? You're the newest member of our group here, and you
Um,
also bring a different perspective as you grew up not in the U.S. or Canada in the West. You grew up in the East.
yeah. From my perspective, I believe that both parents have jobs in raising, they have parts in a job of raising the child. So being raised by a woman is gonna miss, for example, like a few things that the child would have if he was raised by his father, and then a child raised by his father would lack things that he would have if he was raised by a mother. So I believe it's a two-part job.
Oh, I
Now, an example is usually for us, a father's job in raising a child is to discipline him, to teach him about what's right and wrong, and then the other stuff come. However, for like
Discipline seems to be the main thing because
yeah,
the
the main thing.
discipline and ending up in jail, like the more discipline you get as a child, which primarily comes from the father, the stats seem to show the less likely you are to end up in jail. Just as
Yes,
a
and then
basic.
yeah, and then for the mother part, I believe it's more of like academic education, like what
Maybe
else?
some emotional intelligence too, and like
see.
Emotional intelligence.
trust
Yeah,
comes from the mother, and yeah.
Well,
yeah,
so for me, I think it also falls in that I believe a woman orients you to appreciate life. Okay, so I believe your mom teaches you how to love. Your mom teaches you how to forgive. Your mom teaches you how to see perspective, not just black and white. Your mom teaches you how to manage your emotions. Your dad teaches you the practicality of living and in my estimation, I guess, the code of what it is to be a man, right? The ethos of
yes,
the protector, the provider, the steadfastness, the disciplinarian. Your father's role is is unique in the context of the psychology of a kid, I believe. And the idea that masculinity is toxic is also um, a misnomer. I heard Jordan Peterson ask a chick who goes, toxic masculinity. She goes, no, no, no. Let's be precise. You define
Yeah,
toxic
define your
masculinity,
term.
right? Nobody can do that. They
Well, no,
just want to
no, that's not
blanket.
true. There are people like I think sophisticated people can sit down and they can talk like you you do like the exploded view, like if you're an engineer and you're looking at a like an engine or something, you do
Yeah.
the exploded view so you see all the parts in a diagram. You can do that with the idea of masculinity. Like what is masculinity? It's going to be a bunch of things, right? And some of those things, now a lot of it's culturally dependent, but I think in every culture, like you can fight. I don't think there's a perfect expression of masculinity out
Jesus.
there. Okay, well, yeah, but okay, by regular fallible humans, and you could say Muhammad or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
But
pick your religion.
for non deities, yeah, Buddhist, yeah,
Pick your religion.
for non deities, for us regular folk, yeah, I think there's definitely going to always be some aspects of expressed masculinity that at the very least we could say we could do better than that. We could tighten that up a bit. Like some of the sports hazing that really gets over the top. Like, do we really have to do that? Some of the like alcohol poisoning, prove your masculinity by how many shots you can do. BS that have like to me there's lots
That's
of
youth and
examples.
stupid.
Well, yeah,
I don't
but
know
it's
that that's
also it's
exclusively
very
men, because
tradition.
girls do that
But
shit too.
well, they do now, but traditionally that's been a very masculine. Like in the West, has been not so much in Islamic cultures because of the forbiddance of alcohol, but in the West has been very traditionally masculine. Like Animal House, all those movies, right? So I mean,
I want to touch on
it's
something. Stop for a second. I
anyway to finish the point.
ah,
I think that we can at least admit that there are some parts of masculinity that could maybe be called toxic, but what Jordan Peterson's pointing out and what I think is true is that like they're taking that like these little parts and they're saying, well, that's all of masculinity because some of it is toxic, all of it is toxic, and that's just a absurd and b not true.
so I wanted to touch on something that you had said that I find very interesting, and I wanted to ask Bappo about it. I know in the Muslim religion,
yeah,
alcohol is absolutely forbade, like period.
yes,
Um, that has to have an impact positively in their culture. Like,
We were talking about that on the last stream, just about
yeah,
how negative and awful alcohol is. And I was saying that one of the positives of being a Muslim and being in an Islamic culture, everyone in the West is so focused on the negatives, you know. And I'm like, well, one of the positives is that like there's so much negative social, like corrosive social crap and behavior that comes with having alcohol everywhere, and you just don't have to worry about that like that, you know.
there's
People
no
don't
bar
realize
fights.
how bad alcohol is.
So what was that? So I would ask you, Beppo, what's that? How do you think that ties into the, like? So we all think about,
Well, us bring it to toxic masculinity,
yeah,
like if you want to, like, so much of in the West what I think of as toxic, traditionally toxic male behavior, like at college frat houses and stuff like that, it's all tied in with booze. Booze is involved with all of those behaviors. Everyone's drunk when they're doing all of that evil stuff. You can call it what it is. If you're religious, it's demonic. I
yeah.
mean, you're acting like a demon. That, like, alcohol makes you forget how to get to heaven. Smoking weed forgets you, like, makes you forget how to get home and get a bit hungry. Drinking booze makes you forget how to get to heaven. You turn into a demon. Like, it is not to say that weed's forgivable, by the way, but I don't know why I brought that in. Alcohol is just, wow, it's bad.
The thing is, in our religion, um, we believe that anything that we believe that the human body is it's a miracle from God, and
In the
harming
West, I
it
think we
would
say
be,
it's a temple. Yeah.
yeah. And in our religion, we don't want to harm a miracle from God. Like, it's like we should be thankful for it, for existing, and so we try to stay away from anything that may harm this miracle. For example, uh, now there may be some controversy about this, but pork, uh, any kind of like harmful meat, alcohol, drugs, weed, all that stuff, we just don't touch it. Um, so about masculinity, since we don't have any of like the alcohol, and the weed, and drugs in our religion, I don't really have much of a point of view about it. Like in relation to booze,
You never had the experience, and that's good,
yeah, I've never
right?
had the experience. No.
So
Well, like an example that I can bring up of maybe some behaviors that you wouldn't see as much of in Islamic countries that we see in the West based on alcohol. Like if you ever have a Western girlfriend, they're all obsessed with serial killer, like true crime stuff, serial killer documentaries, all that. So you just get your fill. And one of the things I noticed is that, oh, most serial killers in the West, like Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, both of them as the big examples, they both talked about, because they both got caught and they both had some time, they're both very intelligent, very narcissistic, and they talked about kind of their process and all that. Both of them were very explicit. They both said that neither one, like, it was impossible. Both of them used the word impossible to do what they did without alcohol. They had to be skunk drunk, which is inevitably why both of them got caught, because you're also skunk drunk. You're going to make mistakes. You're just not thinking rationally. So yeah,
unless you're just a
it's a
complete,
double-edged
I did
sword.
I did well, I didn't watch the series, or I don't have that much information about the whole Jeffrey Dahmer thing, but uh, I do have a point of view about it. I think they use alcohol to hide the pain of uh, the pain or the guilt, like of taking a human soul, or just having these dangerous thoughts and acting on them.
It seems to, like, we know that from a pure biological and psychology standpoint, that alcohol lowers your inhibitions. And I think when people hear that phrase, it's one of those very like anodyne. It just doesn't sound like you're saying much when you're saying lower inhibitions. But the reality of what that means is kind of like if we replace that language from lowered inhibitions to turns you into your worst self, I think we wouldn't drink as much because that's
Well, so
really what
I want
booze
to.
does for most people. Some people can handle their booze. Some people can actually drink, and it seems to like do something better for them. But still, I wonder, and because I think ultimately, like I agree with Bapo, like doing any kind of recreational drug like everyday sort of thing is you're using it to mask something like that is you're using it as a crutch. There's no doubt that's an addiction, and you're using it to hide some kind of trauma or pain, or not even hide it, just like
Dull it.
you're just dulling it, you're just
Yep.
covering it up.
Well, so
But yeah, booze is like I don't know, it's just one of those ones where you want to talk about like bad masculine behavior. It seems that booze is connected with so much of that, at least in the West. Like, and then I look in Islamic countries and I'm like, are there any big serial killers in any Islamic countries? And I'm like, I'll be damned if I can find a documentary about that. Hmm.
It's very very rare for
Yeah, maybe
anything to
like some
happen.
spree killing where one guy goes nuts and kills a bunch of people at once. But like a serial killer is somebody who has
calculated.
just got, yeah, and over a long period of time they're doing it over and over and over. It's not
Yeah.
some suicide thing. Like it's really a twisted, like it's like they've just turned into this demon in the flesh, and it's self-sustaining. It's not some mode that they come out of. They're just fully committed to the part.
Well, I
And
want.
yeah, booze always seems to be part of that part. Take the booze away, they like Jeffrey Dahmer when he was sober in jail turned into a rational person who was expressing remorse for what he did. Whether or not it's true, well, as the Beach Boys say, God only knows. But yeah, I mean, could have been, and it's just more and more of just like I think of all the
So,
bad things that I did as a young man in my 20s, and I was drunk for every single one of them, every single one.
so I want to circle this back into our initial topic because we kind of tangented a little bit. Um,
Yeah, male disposability, right?
yeah, but
I wrote
I
like a
think
pro and
that
an
goes
against
to.
list, so
I
just
think
to
this conversation we were just having about masculinity goes towards the actual nature of man, right? I think men as a creature, we have a predisposition for risk. Um, and I think all of those behaviors are risky. And risk makes men feel alive, right? We have to test ourselves. That's every child, every young boy will test like how far can I jump, how high can I go, right? All of these things I think are interesting. So there's a ROI for what's the word? Exploring why are men violent. But I think that would be a totally new discussion for maybe next week, because I
yeah,
think
that
that's a
short answer testosterone,
right. But I
but
think
yeah, that would be a different topic.
yeah, I think where we circle this back to our initial discussion is let's go into what makes a man
I've got a
valuable.
well, I've got a list here
Sure,
as
go
well.
for it.
Just
Sure.
I made like a pro and against for male disposability from two angles, from the biological angle and the social angle. So I'll just kind of quickly go over it and then just pick something out that sounds good and away we go.
You got
So
it.
so for the biological angle, for the pro for male disposability, so this is saying it's a good thing. I have, well, the health of the species is determined by the number of wombs. The species can keep reproducing with lots of wombs and a few, quite happy penises. You don't need one penis for every womb at a biological angle. So because of that fact, at a biological angle, nature tends to experiment more with the males than it does with the females because of that disposability factor built into males. It also has males be more competitive with each other to the point of death because of that same disposability. You notice that females do not compete with each other in general to the point of death in any mammalian species or any species at all, really. Females do not compete to the death for mating rights. That is only something that males tend to do. In human beings, we see this this kind of disposability or this willingness to take more chances with men in IQ distribution. So the average IQ between men and women, between males and females and humans is identical. It's the same, but the distribution is different. So women cluster more towards the center, towards the mean. So that means that the average, the mean IQ of women is right in that middle. You just have most women kind of clustered between 90 and 110. Big spike in the middle. Men are much more distributed out towards the tails, which is why, roughly speaking, we have more male idiots and more male geniuses. This might also explain why 90% of the homeless population is male. So this is all this all just unfolds from that initial biological fact that at its most fundamental level, the health of a species is determined by the number of wombs. So that's all kind of the pro-biological angle. The social angle that's pro-male disposability, this is one that I'm more kind of pro on, is men, the idea of men as moral protectors. So I think that Babel can speak to this with regards to the more the Islamic and Arabic angle, but I think I'm pretty confident it's going to be there too. Just men are supposed to be socially defined as moral protectors. They're supposed to protect the weak and the disadvantaged, those weaker than them, which is pretty much it, which is women and children basically. This seems to be a pretty universal thing. I've watched coverage of some of these like theater shootings in the U.S. where men or college shootings where men have taken bullets for some of their female classmates and died, and the women have survived and have been tearfully talking about it. And the coverage from all political angles just seems to be universally positive. No one seems to have any issue with this whatsoever. So I think it's safe to say that like socially we do, and like men, like women and children on lifeboats first, men being the last out of a burning house. These are all overwhelmingly, I think, still not only socially accepted but socially expected of men. And I think that's traditional as well, and I don't think there's a huge problem with that. And my final part of that is that like men are the primary antagonists in most criminal behaviors, so men kind of owe it to be the primary defenders of it as well. So that's the pro side. The against side, so I think this will be more to Mean's liking, and to mine as well, because I agree with all this. Like, the problem with viewing men in that biologically disposable way is that it can lead to, if it's not balanced with something else, it can lead to some really, really bad biological outcomes for the species. And the most obvious one I can think of is World War I, where we had all of Europe and, well, all of Western Europe anyways, and Russia, and of course Canada and the United States, test our most able-bodied men, pick the genetically healthiest of all of them, and then send them into a giant meat grinder where their skill, their strength, and their IQ had nothing to do with their chances of survival. It was just trench warfare where they were being gassed and shelled over the distance by artillery barrages, and there's just nothing you can do about that. It was one of the dumbest things. And from a biological perspective, we took 50 million of our best males, the ones that were fittest, to like the ones that should have been procreating from a biological perspective, and we just killed them off. And we left all the males that, from a hard biological perspective, shouldn't have been procreating to procreate. So, from a biological perspective, like it's obvious that you have to have a limit on this idea that men are disposable, because um, that was obviously insane, and that didn't do the species any good. That was a mistake, which I think is why it's never really happened again. World War II did happen, and a bunch more people did die, but that was for an actual reason. Like our threshold to get us there was a lot higher. World War One, it was some archduke getting shot got 50 million dudes dead. Yeah, we haven't done that again. So, I mean, and then the social angle, just to wrap this up, for the against, especially now in the modern days, but throughout all of time, the majority of the geniuses and inventors have been and continue to be male. I think that a big part of that is that IQ distribution, but another big part of that is that males have to compete for breeding rights in human society going forward, like today and going forward, as well as in the past. And inventing something and becoming rich, or being a genius like Elon Musk, like he already has 10 kids with the hottest women you can find on the planet. You know, those guys are all male, and the amount of value that they contribute, well, not all, but the majority of them are male, and they um, the value they contribute to human society is vast. And you don't have to focus on the geniuses. The vast majority of the world has been and will continue to be built at the micro granular level by healthy functional men. So we're talking
Well, everything is built
plumbers,
by men.
bricklayers.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything that's built with actual stuff is built by men. So treating that workforce as disposable
It's bad.
doesn't make a lot of sense from a social angle. Yeah. So there, I've talked enough. I'm gonna step back now. That was just the notes I had for like talking points to get us going. Discuss.
So I'm gonna chime in, then Bap, I'll give you the floor for a minute. The the thing that I was listening to Chris talk about that struck me is there's a fundamental difference in role. Bappo said it earlier. Women make people, men make things. So the
100% correct. Yes.
the reality is men are not disposable in my estimation, and I think by taking men out of the home, out of the family, treating men like their contributions are, you inseminated an egg, that's all you do, right? That, and I've heard that many years ago. It was said to me that, you didn't do it, you didn't make a child, you just got a girl pregnant. No, 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 no. When you are in a child's life, yeah, you're a part of that. But there are so many women that will go, oh yeah, he's a sperm donor, he's not really a man. And it's like, well, what have you done to propagate the relationship with that man and that child? Did you say to your child, yeah, your father was great? Or did you say, yeah, I understand why you don't want to see him because he doesn't call you enough? Like there's a there's a malevolence amongst women towards men in our society today. There's no reverence, and I really want to understand why that really is, and I think it leads back to women believe men are of little value.
I mean, there's certainly a huge. I would love. I don't know how it would ever be tracked, but the anecdotal reports of we have so many women now, not just men, but so many young women talking now about how they were raised by a divorced single mother, and how their mother just did all she could to poison their hearts and minds against their father and against men in general. It's one of the things that I'm really proud. Like, my mom and dad divorced, but my mom always, like, my mom to this day doesn't speak ill of my dad, even though she has better reason than any. and she always encouraged me and my sister to maintain contact with him and spoke well of him. And I know how rare that is because like I've seen so many people talk about how they were raised to hate men, and it's just, yeah, and it's like there's no man in the house. Instead there's a woman in the house that who's who you listen to all day, and she's your mom and she loves you, and all she does is bitch about men. And it's like, oh, that is just,
Yeah.
yeah, that's not good. You don't want to. So going back to that, the world has been and will continue to be built by men. You don't want to think of that workforce as disposable, and I think by extension you also don't want to hate that workforce. I don't think that's good either.
What do you think, Peppa?
Well, I wouldn't really have a very good insight into this because I'm only 19 years old. I don't really know much about this, but um, what I believe is that neither men or women are disposable. Um, of course, there might be some uh, I don't know how to say it in English, but
Evolutionary, evolutionary, biological. It's the idea that the furtherance of our species. That's evolutionary is the word I think you're looking for.
no,
Depends what you're
I
looking
meant
for.
like conflicts in marriage, like
Oh, oh.
about speaking about like the father, the son, in the family, and it doesn't really happen. It barely does happen in our religion, so I wouldn't really have that much of an insight. But
Well, I
um,
don't think you live in a culture where men are seen as disposable in this way. Correct
no,
me if I'm wrong. I mean,
no,
yeah,
in
like
my
this is a
in
Western thing.
yes, and I do believe that it is heavily um, based on men drinking booze and being under the influence and all that stuff. But
That's a part of it. And also, I think
basically,
like we don't have
yeah,
what you have, which is um, we don't have that. Like our society isn't all grounded in the same roughly agreed upon set of values and morals, in your case called Islam. The West, we divorced ourselves of all those traditional values. So now we're all kind of like, I mean, there are lots of religious people and traditional people, but they're all like of different types, of different sorts. They argue with each other. They're all doing the best they can. But
Well,
yeah,
Peterson says it like this. Peterson says, whatever's at the top of your hierarchical pyramid is your deity. So in the West, that's you. Most of our Western society is narcissistic by absolute
that's
definition.
true. Yeah, that is true. Even a lot of religious people, sadly, in the West are narcissistic. Whereas, I mean, um, again, I don't want to be the guy who's telling a Muslim about his own religion. I'm just going on what little I know, and correct me if I'm wrong. But like, doesn't Islam, like its fundamental meaning, is like is like what's it? Submission to God. It like
yes,
humility is built right into the name of the thing, and humility is the thing that the West needs so much of right now. In my opinion, it's just, and I know that's coming from me and how ironic that is, but like I can
it
see
takes
it myself. Like I can see that I need it too. I can see that it would be good for me too. Like it's, yeah, yeah, like humility. It's just, yeah.
thing is having morals and ethics would completely change your everyone's point of view about gender equality and masculinity and whether whether either of the genders are disposable. In
Well,
reality, neither of them are disposable. Neither
well,
women
clearly,
or
like
men are disposable because if they were in our religion, God wouldn't have made two genders. They would have just made one gender that can reproduce, that can. that can go to war, that can do everything that the two genders can do to, since the beginning of time till this day. So, like, um,
It's a good argument for biology too, because like from an evolutionary standpoint, if the species is a big efficiency machine, if it didn't need both sexes, it would if it could run more efficiently with only one sex and just become asexual, it would do that. But it doesn't because it can't. We're
yes,
irreducibly complex. We need at this point in like pretty much all mammals, like no, you need male and the female at a fundamental level. So we put that in the against category. At a fundamental level, you need males and females. Like you can't. So like the word disposable needs to like have. I don't know. Like I looked it up, and the definition has a couple of lines. The one is the first is designed to be disposed of after use, which is the big negative one that most people mean colloquially. The second one is about taxes, which is weird. I think it means disposable income. The third
yeah,
one is free for use, available, um, and that one to me is a little more. That one to me gets a little more into um, like towards the pro aspect of it, where it's like if a ship is sinking, who's free for use to volunteer to stay on the ship so that the women and kids can get on the lifeboats, or if uh, we have a new plane and we need someone to test pilot it.
It's not going to be a
Um,
girl.
yeah, and it's pretty
probably
dangerous.
won't be a no.
It's probably it should probably like, and it not only is it probably not going to be a dude. I would go as far as to say it probably should be, or it's not going to be a woman. I would go and make it moral and say it probably should be a dude. Like it's
But
just
why?
Going back to the risk
because
conversation
we
we had.
like risk.
Yes,
Do you think
then
we're disposed to it?
yes,
Oh, genetically and socially,
genetically.
yes. And socially as well. I think that again now I don't know how it works in Islamic culture, but again, I would imagine there's some analog. Like there's good. I think in every culture you're going to find. My prediction is going to be you're going to find some way that there is for young men to show off. However that's allowed to show off their genetic strengths and to show off their potential as a mate to females. I mean, that just it, I don't see how you would keep a lid like the way you keep a lid on that traditionally is with rules of decorum. Like the Irish, like that scene from that old Irish movie where the American goes over and he becomes part of Irish culture and he starts dating a woman, but it's him and the woman um, on a cart with their chaperone, who's this grouchy old village guy who doesn't like anyone, literally just sitting right behind them watching them. Or like in The Godfather where he goes to Italy and he meets the girl and he starts courting her after asking her father, and the two of them are walking side by side down the village road, not holding hands but like close, and then like she stumbles and he like holds her arm to make sure she gets up and then separates himself, and then the camera pulls back and the entire village is walking behind them and they're all commenting, oh, that was good, that was like, yeah, that's good behavior. Like that sort of thing was, I think, the way that you would like kind of balance it. But now in the West we've gone from that to
Swipe right.
Tinder.
Yeah,
Tinder,
swipe
yeah.
right.
Which I can't even. I don't need to describe it. I've never used it. I never will. It is disgusting. I can't even like talk about a new moral low for a society. I say this to so many of my friends, my leftist friends, who pretend to care about like the opinions of people from other cultures, and I'm like, do you not understand that? So I'm not going to speak for all of them because they're not some monolithic group. They're a bunch of diverse people like us. But I know for a fact that a lot of them, like a lot of people in the non-West, are looking at the West and what we're doing, and like they're either laughing their butts off or they're just shaking their heads and looking to each other and going, see, this is why we do what we do, so that we don't do that. I'm like, do you not get how right they are? I mean, like on a fundamental level, like they're watching us. Okay, we're not going to deviate, but just as like they're watching us with like the trans kid stuff, and they're like, yeah, see, this is why
Is
we
that even
stick
a
up for
thing,
the.
Beppo, in Turkey? Is there such thing as transgender people in Turkey?
I'll
Do,
tell you some. I'll tell you one thing. In Islam, we coming back to the whole miracle, like the body is the human body is a miracle made by God, and it should be valuable to humans, like their body. Um, in Islam, I believe it. It's not liked. It's not like it's hated. It's hated to see someone like change their gender, but I'm not really 100% sure if it's not allowed in our religion.
I would guess
But
that
but
it's so rare that your religion probably just hasn't dealt with it because, like,
it is
actual
rare.
trans, not this social contagion we have in the West, but the actual condition is really rare. Yeah.
yeah.
Plus, you may not know this, but Erdogan, the president now, the president of Turkey, I believe last year he made some kind of statement against uh, transgender and LGBTQ plus.
You know,
Yeah, I think he's made
They
a
made like
few
a they
that
made like
popped
a
up in the West. Yeah.
yeah they
well, so there's a there was a
See, just to comment on that, that's what's such a tragedy to me is that like nobody has gotten screwed over more by this whole trans stuff
the
than the
children.
gays than the, well, okay, well, it's starting to be them, but like gays and lesbians, like it's like conservative normal gays and lesbians, oh my goodness, they, I don't want to speak for all of them, but I have some gay and lesbian friends that, well, all my gay and lesbian friends are pretty conservative, and they hate this whole trans thing. Oh my, it is just, there's a civil war in the LGBTQ community right now, and it's the LGBTQ because that's really just all the same people versus the T, and oh,
the
it's
trans.
crazy.
I
There are
saw.
many people that are against being transgender.
Yeah, it
It's
really is like that threshold where I think like the integration of gay and lesbian people into like American Western society went fine, although the gay pride parade really needs to stop. That's so contrary to the whole, I don't know, like it's just, oh, I'm not going to make the comparison. I was thinking of a Chris Rock comparison in my head. It's like when you have that division in a community where like half your community are good, law-abiding, upstanding, moral people that just want to live good lives and be left alone and pay their taxes, and then you've got the other half of the community that is just insane and extreme and embarrassing and loud and
So I heard a either a reel, a short, or TikTok or whatever. I'll never download TikTok, but I saw this
same.
thing that it was an Arab guy, and he goes, "The sun and the moon are both equally valuable, and when the moon is trying to be the sun or tries to change jobs, it's called an eclipse, and it blocks out the sun, and it befalls darkness." And that's the same thing with a mother and a father if they try and change roles. Each have a
Oh,
role
well, that's
that
very poetic. I like that.
they each have a role that they
The
add.
eclipse is the moon trying to be the sun. But in
Yeah.
trying to be the sun, all it does is create global darkness. It creates the opposite of what it was trying. That's very nice. I
That's
like
it.
that.
It's a very nice figure of speech.
It was a really nice way of presenting the two genders in a manner that everyone can relate to, because the moon controls the ocean, the tide, it controls life in general, and the sun
Well, and
brings
the moon
forth
is very
life.
traditionally linked with the female,
Yep. And
with
the
the menstrual
sun,
cycle, and yeah.
and the sun makes everything grow and produce. So I think that there's a lot of truth in that, and I think that there's an intrinsic value to each one, and I think that's where this really makes the idea of men being disposable not plausible. I
I
think
wrote
there's a
that down actually
condition.
as a new angle for the against the which is the social religious angle that the human body is valuable and sacred, so therefore it cannot be disposable. It's just
So
impossible.
I think that there's
Yeah,
a
it's true.
hierarchical. I think in circumstance you have to make a evolutionary decision on who's going to do the risk things, right? Who's going to tame the beast? Who's going to cut down the tree? Who's going to build the house? You know, your wife can do it, but should she? Right? She's not really equipped for it. But and
Yeah,
but if no nothing, look at these frontier women that their husband died, and they're out in the middle of nowhere, and
yeah, they can do it.
they survive and make ranches, and once the boys are old enough to be men, they bring their and then that they flourish. But it's
But
not
that's
because
not
it's
the
ideal, but
yeah,
because
that's
they
the
were
exception.
correct.
That's like the romantic. It's like we in the West we've just fallen in love with this romantic ideal that we can all be like the protagonist in this movie that's the world that stars us, and it's just like, you know for every brave frontier woman who did that,
100
there's
died.
probably 100 who just died or went insane or just found another man. Like it's just, yeah. We never, we're in the West. We so focus on we're so celebrity obsessed. We focus on the ones who make it. That's why Bull Durham. I watched Bull Durham the other night. And it's just like that's just a great guys movie. It's also that's a movie you can watch with your woman and she'll like it too. But it's just a great guys film, and it's just, yeah, it's because it focuses on the minor league guys, the guys who don't quite get to make it to the show, the guys who don't quite get to have baseball cards, the guys that we almost know their names, but not quite, the guys who barely make enough money to put it together and have to like have
Well,
a second job working at Sears. It's just all about them, and I'm like, I think in the West we need to be talking more. It's like Mike Rowe. Mike Rowe does a great job about celebrating those guys, like the hard work that men do to build this comfy world that people live in without thinking about. They're sitting on the toilet, taking a poop, leaving a mean comment on a YouTube thread using an iPhone, and they're like, anti-capitalist and like anti-male, and it's like everything that you have in that moment has been created for and given to you by men. Like, there's a level of ungratefulness at one point that
and I
you just
think
have to
that's why you have men
compromise.
going their own way. So
Oh yeah, when you
so
stop celebrating men and then start hating men
we're
for
going to stop
doing,
doing,
yeah,
and that's
but
where we
that's
are
not
now. Japan,
that's
they
not good
look at
either.
Japan. They're not procreating. Like there is a lot of serious issues around the world where men have been so um,
It's kind of feminized, emasculated. Like there's
emasculate.
this,
Well, I think that there's a
like I think
reason for the
about,
demasculation of
you can
men.
you can see it in our own lifetimes.
Yeah.
Like in our own lifetimes in the West. I remember when I grew up, I would watch like these like old Disney shorts about like Davy Crockett or the Alamo, and
Mm.
and just like heroic men going down fighting, doing great deeds, and really celebrated for being macho. And then you watch like the '80s movies and Predator and all that. And it's just like, oh yeah, being a man's awesome. Now fast forward to today where it's like all those same things. If you even say that those things are awesome in most circles in the West, like someone's going to give you a side eye. Someone's going to look at you like you just, said something, like you just pulled a Kanye and said something good about Hitler. It's just like, no, I was just saying that I like being a guy. Everyone looks at you. It's like, what? You mean you don't hate your
Own existence?
heteronormative patriarchal masculinity? Yeah, you don't hate your own existence.
Cisgender.
And it's just like, no, and I don't think you should. And again, I don't think, I think that the West has basically been performing this giant experiment in throwing away tradition, throwing away
That's the
all of
recent
the
phenomenon.
well,
That
yeah,
has been
that's
going
why
for the
they
last
very
10
that's
years.
yeah, like last 50 years
10.
has yeah, well, it's really accelerated. Sure, we'll say yeah, whatever you care to put it at. The West has been engaging in this experiment in what would happen if we just like rejected everything, all of our traditions, all of the wisdom of our ancestors, and just presumed in our arrogance that we know better because we have cell phones.
Have you
And
seen the
I think we're seeing the result, and I think more traditional countries like those in Arabic cultures, as well as in China, as well as in sub-Saharan Africa, I think all those more traditional cultures, which all have access to the internet, they're all watching us
China
do
doesn't?
this. Well, they do. It's just behind a big firewall. And believe me, the Chinese government is showing all their Chinese citizens all cherry picked, like all the worst of the West. Oh, I'm sure all the Chinese citizens see that. They don't see our best, but they'll see our worst. And yeah, I think all those more traditional places are looking at us and just quietly, just kind of nodding their like. If we think that we're convincing anyone with the way we're behaving, that this is the way that you should
Forward.
restructure your societies, I don't think we're convincing anyone. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bappo. Do you look at the West and think to yourself, boy, we have to make a bunch of fundamental changes to our own Islamic society to make us more congruent with that vision? Or do you think,
No.
no, I'm thinking we're doing the right thing, we're going to stick with this?
Well, in terms of gender equality, I believe we're doing better. That's for sure.
Right? Yeah.
But there are some other like ideas or things that the Western societies are more advanced in or are
Sure.
better
Yeah.
in. But
Well,
for gender
Yeah.
equality, it's definitely something that like can't be. I wouldn't say it can't be argued about, but most probably any argument would result in the statement of just like, yeah, Arabic people have this like covered. There are no conflicts about gender equality in the Arabic countries in the Islamic religion.
Yeah, and it's really funny because that has been expressed via um, like opinion polls that have been done in in Islamic countries, and the like for example opinion polls on certain Arab or Islamic garb like the burqa, and inevitably all the polls I've seen by like Pew Research come back with the women and the men in those countries and cultures being overwhelmingly for those things. And when that's presented to like feminists in the West, where it's like believe all women, blah blah blah. Okay, well, women in these Islamic countries in all these polls are representing like they're reporting very high levels of satisfaction with these things that you find so problematic. How do you respond to that? And inevitably what they respond with is the most insult. Like inevitably, what they respond with is, "Oh, they're brainwashed," and it's like, do you not understand how insulting, condescending, and also just from a rational standpoint, unsatisfying that answer is? That hundreds of millions of women all say the same thing about a thing that you disagree with, and then your response to that is, oh, those hundreds of millions of women are all brainwashed by their patriarchal overlords.
there
Well,
is
I
also
guess that's possible, but you know what's more likely is that they're all telling the truth about their experience and you just can't handle it. Like, that's what I think anyways. Like,
there is also one thing I want to mention. Um, it's like it might be a comparison between the Eastern and Western countries. Um, I don't know if you follow like the series or the new movies that come out on Netflix, Amazon Prime, just those platforms. Do you follow any of these?
Yeah.
sort of, yeah.
Uh, I I'm 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 into like watching series and movies always in my free time. Um, so and I've also seen Andrew Tate talk about this and a few other influencers. I think Joe Rogan
Is
was.
this cute? Is this cuties?
No,
Huh?
just let him talk. Keep going.
Yeah, I keep going.
Uh, Men are always undermined in Western series and movies.
Oh, yes.
So men are always shown as dumb and stupid, and women are shown as intelligent and um, well
Adjusted.
sophisticated and well
We call them boss babes.
Yeah, women
Yeah,
are.
the women are always like basically goddesses, and the men are always these dumb schmucks that are just lucky
always.
to have them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost in every single series or movie. It's always shown there, like the main character and the side character and all that. Uh, and this is all recent. Like the older uh, s- series and movies, they were about men, but recently, like 2018 uh, and after, they're all just about like women and undermining men in the shows.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
they're
to
about
my
they're about
knowledge,
women basically becoming men.
Well, that's the idea.
well, becoming masculine.
Yeah.
Women
Yes,
becoming masculine.
masculine,
Yes,
correct.
Well,
but
go ahead.
yeah. No, no, you can go ahead.
What I was going to chime in is I was watching a thing, the uh, Pearls podcast, and she had said something that kind of struck me, and she was like, women are more interested in demasculating men, or they don't find men to have very much value. But she's like, yeah, men don't need women. Women need men, because and Andrew Tate talks about it too. He's like, yeah,
Well, and what Bap's talking about, that's something that's been
yeah,
noticed for quite a while in Western culture by some of our comedians is that, yeah, boy, you sure can't find like, I like
a
sometimes
smart man movie.
or just a movie where a man is like the only place you can find a movie where a man is masculine is like a James Bond movie. That's about
Yeah,
it.
like
And
action
he's
movies.
yeah, exactly. And it's
Yeah,
just, and even then, it's getting like James Bond's going to be rebooted as a woman, and it's just like, oh, here we go. Like
yeah, but
putting
yeah,
women
it's
in
always
the
in
same
in
spots as men is not feminist. It's
in
just
those action movies. Um, Even though the man is like the main character, the smart one, the impossible to defeat one. There's always going to be that conflict, like scene or a part of the movie or show, uh, where the woman like outsmarts him or like does something where he's like in a big problem,
He's in Quagmire, and she
and
or
gets him
then
out.
saves them. Yeah,
or yeah, either saves him or just like creates a huge conflict for him,
Well,
or like an obstacle that he has to overcome.
Well, it's just like what happened to. I mean, I understand. Like in the '60s and '70s, we got a bit sophisticated. You know, from the John, like in the West, we had like the John Wayne '40s and '50s, where it was just like there was only one archetype of man on the screen, and it was like the John Wayne type. You know, and Steve
God,
McQueen
I
and all
miss
that.
that man.
I know, right? I miss Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen to me was like the epitome of cool.
No,
Um, but
uh,
anyway, so we went
Paul
from
Newman.
that. Like then you had, we kind of went. We got a bit artsy fartsy in the '60s and '70s, and we had what's his name, um, the little Manhattan, the guy who made the movie Manhattan. Annie Hall molested his uh, stepdaughter. Uh,
Manhattan.
yeah, who's the guy who did the movie
One sec.
Manhattan? Oh, it's pathetic that I can't remember his name. Every single movie he makes is about him. Woody Allen.
Woody Woody
Woody
Allen.
Allen,
Yeah,
yeah. So then
Isaac
Woody
Davis, by the
Allen,
way.
yeah, Woody Allen started making movies, and they were all about him as this like tiny little, basically like a very feminine, like little hyper intelligent little Jew guy, and that became like its own thing for a while. And then the '80s came around, and we shook that off, and we were like, let's get some muscles back on the
Predator.
screen. And Predator, yeah, and Commando.
Last action
We,
hero.
you got like Arnie and Sylvester Stallone competing with each other at the box office, and it was just, oh, it was so great. And oh, by the way, in the '80s, we also managed to create the greatest feminist action heroine ever in Ripley in the Alien and Aliens movies.
Yeah,
So while we
absolutely.
were being this masculine testosterone craziness, we also made the greatest feminist. And then yeah, the '90s kind of it started to fizzle out a bit, and now it's just like now it's to the point where it's ridiculous because the men who are admired by these feminist women unironically are the top 0.0001. Like you get feminists who are like, well, not all men are pigs, you know. Chris Hemsworth is okay, and it's Idris Elba. Idris Elba's good, and it's just like Naveen Andrews is fine, and you're like, okay, like those are the very best guys that those races and cultures and ethnicities could produce. Like that's what you're settling on. Oh God, like we're all so screwed. And yeah, they've lost the ability to appreciate what a good, honest, normal, hardworking guy brings to society. There's no value in it. There's no value in it. Like if you work a 9 to 5 job and bring home decent money with a good pension and good health care, you're called a drone.
Well, even more so,
Like that's so disrespectful. It's like, no, that's a provider.
I,
You should
I'm
marry that guy.
I'm gonna throw another wrench in the works because I think there's several pieces of this that I think will go towards that. Right. So pornography is the largest thing that killed monogamy and marriage in the same regard that because you think about it, pornography makes the standard of sex
Well,
impossible,
let's be
right?
specific. Internet
Internet
pornography.
pornography, right?
Because
Internet
pornography's
pornography.
existed for a
Oh yeah,
very
but
long time. Pornography technically exists in the Bible. Some of the songs of Solomon are a little racy. I'm not
so
familiar with
I I,
the
I wanted I
Hermaphrodites,
wanted
but
I wanted to finish the point because there's more to it.
yeah, yeah.
So if pornography desensitizes men to sexuality and creates an unreasonable expectation, I think what we're seeing with movies today is that men are being there's a standard the like there's just no earthly way a guy's going to achieve that standard and he knows it.
Well, and
So
that's why
there's
like
no
Fresh
point
and
in
Fit.
trying, right?
That's why these podcasts like Fresh and Fit have become so huge because all those guys like Myron and of the Red Pill MGTOW community, really all they're doing for the most part is spewing statistics at these women who are like average gals, and that's fine. I'm average. Like average is the norm. Being called
Yeah.
average shouldn't offend you. And it's like these average women all think that they're going to get like a 6'6" basketball player worth millions, and you realize that they're not kidding. They actually think that, and the math doesn't add up. So yeah, all those guys are doing is just being like there's a couple websites on, like there's a delusion calculator that you can find online where you just plug in some basic stats about your ideal mate, and then using the census info for the U.S., it just gives you the probability, like what percentage of people are you looking for, and these women are looking for like 0.001, and it makes you understand immediately. Oh, maybe this is why arranged marriage is still the norm in like, oh, it's got to be at least half the world's population, at least. I mean,
Is it
arranged
arranged in
marriages have been around
Turkey?
forever.
Uh, well, not that I know of, but it is featured in shows. It is featured in shows, arranged marriage. But I'm not sure
It's
if
not
it's a
unknown,
thing
right?
that always happens.
No, like
I
in
don't think
in
so.
some
But
communities, it's like in some African communities, it's every marriage is arranged.
uh,
But yeah, I don't think it's going to be that in Turkey. Turkey's
no,
pretty modern.
no. Of course, there will be a few arranged marriages, but I wouldn't say 50%. It's like it's way lower because keep in mind we're not in the same era as like when this thing started.
But
It
that's
started in
still,
the
just to be clear, that's still amazing, because like in Canada, the number of arranged marriages, it wouldn't be a whole number. It would be under 1%. You just said under 50%. So what percent did
no,
it's such a culture thing. What percentage would you guess are arranged in Turkey?
like um it would be a total guess because like I said I don't know, but
Yeah,
if I
yes.
if I was to give an estimate, probably like around 5%, maybe 4%.
Okay, 1 in 20. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That's more than Canada, that's for sure.
Yeah, not. I don't think there's any in the U.S.
It's still
Yeah, like it's like
it's still a total guess. Like it could be
yeah.
higher or lower. It could be hell. It could be a 60% or it could be a 0.5%.
So
It's a total guess.
in this topic of are men disposable, I don't think there it would be. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't, because we've talked about a lot of the negative of men. We're violent. We're we've talked about all the
I
bad
think we've
stuff.
been mostly defending it, to be honest. I think
Yeah,
we've been mostly been against the disposability so
and
far,
I think that
which is fine. I'm all for that.
yeah, self preservation is a common trait amongst most humans.
Well,
Um,
I think it's also like like most of the examples that I have for where male disposability, you can make positive arguments for it. One of the things that I do notice is that most of those times are extremes,
yeah,
where like at the extremes. So like sure, testing fighter jets, space exploration, really risky physical jobs, stopping criminals in the act. Like these are all pretty extreme moments. Oh yeah, ships sinking. Yeah, not normal things. I think in our day-to-day lives, there's no reason to think of anyone as being disposable. If you're a human being, you're not disposable. Um, but yeah, then when you get to the extremes, then I think you start to see um, it becomes more complicated. It definitely becomes more complicated at the extremes.
There's one thing I want to mention. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole masculinity topic, it rose after the rise of feminism, right?
It wasn't even a conversation, I
It
think,
wasn't a
until
conversation.
feminism came
It
around. So yeah,
Yes, so it only rose up to oppose feminism.
well, I don't think we even ever. I mean, like poets have written about like all the things a man should have and all that. And I mean, we had handbooks of masculinity and stuff like that back in the old days. But I don't think it was ever really much of a topic of conversation because everyone was just in agreement on the fundamental goodness of men and usefulness and what they brought or what they should bring when they're proper and what a properly constituted man is. Yeah, I don't think that was ever in doubt in the West um, until feminism. Yeah.
So, and that goes back to my sun and moon analogy that I stole from a guy, that when the moon tries to be the sun, it just makes everything worse. It just
Well, and
blots out.
it's something that it kind of it leads to something. I'm not going to go on a tangent, but I'll just quickly say it's something I've been thinking about more and more as I age, as a pretty much a lifelong. I want to say atheist because that's harsh. Lifelong agnostic, but um, and Peterson talked a lot about it. When you take away that traditional bedrock foundation of a culture like we did in the West, when you take that all away, um, you'd better have something pretty sophisticated there to replace it because it does a lot of good work. And we in the West, in the 20s and 30s in particular after World War One, and then going forward, we've become very secular, which is funny because like in the United States and Canada, still like 90+% of the population calls itself religious on the surveys, but not acting very religiously. Like we've become very, very secular, and we've just abandoned all these traditional narratives and morals and religious institutions that we've had. And I've watched it as an atheist, and I'll just call myself that for ease of, and I've seen so many of my friends or ex-friends or just people I've known who are atheists go down really bad paths and become really bad people. And maybe not like in the sense of going to jail, but just in terms of like their attitudes and it's,
They've
yeah,
become God.
well,
They're the
it's led
top
me
of their
to a,
pyramid.
it's led me to a timid conclusion, which is that um, atheism isn't for everyone. I think it might not be for very many people at all, because like if you bring like Andrew Tate is a perfect example of a man that I can honestly say, as an atheist, that man needs Jesus or Muhammad. He needs Islam or Christianity or something, because if he had that, he would be so much better because
He,
on it would stamp out most of the things in him that are bad, and it would bring forward even more so many of the things in him that are clearly good. And
I don't
atheism
know.
hasn't does that. He's clearly an atheist. Atheism has given him no boundaries or guide rules, and he's a massive narcissist. He thinks he's the smartest man on the planet. If he was a Muslim, if he was a Christian, I think he would just be a better person. It's
I don't know
weird
if
as an
you
atheist to say that, but it is.
I don't know if you know this already, but he has converted into Islam.
Oh, has he? Oh, thank goodness. Like
He
he needs
has.
something.
Andrew Tate has. Yeah, yes, he's converted to Islam a couple months ago.
That's good.
Well,
He needs
imprisonment will do that to
something.
you. So
Well, hopefully
religion,
it's a wake up. Hopefully it
it
was a
is.
wake up call for him,
Wait,
where it's
that
just like he needs he needs to he needs to submit himself to something greater than himself. And if it's not going to be Muhammad, then it's going to be the prison system. Like
Yeah.
he was riding too high. He was too arrogant. You can't be that arrogant. The universe is going to cut you down. And even if they are
that makes
BS
sense.
charges, like whatever, I'm glad to hear that's really good news actually.
Well, I'm gonna.
Because he needed something. He's so much of him is good. There's so much of him that's a good man, but
I,
then there's so much of him that's toxic. And the only thought I had in my head was like, most of that toxic stuff, I don't think he would be sitting on it. He wouldn't be doing it if he was a good religious man,
well,
like Christian, Muslim, something, Buddhist, whatever. But he worships himself and money,
well,
and that isn't guiding him in a good path.
I would agree with you there. but it also comes back to when you're talking about atheism versus a belief in something, and I think I can sum this up in a nice little bow. The atheist lacks hope.
Well, innately, yes. Atheism is not, when you become an atheist, you are not bringing something into yourself. You are pushing something away. And that thing that you're taking out of yourself, that you're pushing away, I think most atheists only focus on the negatives that they perceived that tradition doing to themselves. And I know that I did. I didn't think about the positives until I encountered Jordan Peterson. It never occurred to me to think about, well, what good was it doing?
Right.
And how am I going to replace that good with something else? Intelligent, sophisticated atheists can go to secular humanism. They can cobble together some system themselves that can make them coherent, good, consistent people. But I think that's asking a lot of a person, and I don't think everyone is up to the task. And I
Well,
think that we've kind of just like converted a huge chunk of our population in the West into functional atheists without even considering, is this actually
uh,
going to result in them behaving better and being happier? Because all of the data that I'm aware of, psychological data that looks at the self-reported happiness and lifespan of atheists versus religious people are happier and live longer lives.
you know
So
who lives the longest?
I'm sure they're religious.
Yep, Seventh Day Adventist, the longest living people in the world by like
Oh, as
twenty
like
percent.
as a as a
Yeah.
seventh day. Well, they would have to be in the West because
Well,
longest living is a lot about access to health care, right?
right, but
So,
what from one of the things, and my
but they
wife
would
and I
also
have
have to
talked
be
about
religious.
this.
I have no doubt of that. It's
Yeah.
not going to be
So
some communist atheist thing.
no,
No way.
my wife is a Seventh Day Adventist, and here's the weird thing, right? Saturdays they do no work. Period. They take a day of rest. She won't buy things. She won't. She does nothing on Saturday. Okay.
I think
That that
Jews do that as well. I believe. I don't know if it's Saturday, but
But their Saturday, their Sabbath is held, and they don't eat pork, much like Muslims. They have a controlled diet. Um, They don't eat anything that doesn't have scales, right? So they don't eat crustaceans. They don't eat They don't eat um, like
oh, shellfish. Yeah, yeah, no
correct
shellfish.
because they're scavengers, right?
And there's sound religious reason for that. I remember atheists used to make fun of that, like, oh, no shellfish, that's so weird. But then if you live on the West Coast, oh, there's this thing called red tide, and yeah, when like you can have shellfish that normally is very healthy to eat, all of a sudden become poisonous and kill you, and there's like really nothing you can do to see that coming. Or like prohibition, like all the prohibitions, those animal prohibitions have had um, historical correlates found in the historical record for like it wasn't just some random thing that they told you, like God's like, I'm gonna make pigs, but then I'm gonna make them delicious, then I'm gonna tell them not to eat them just to mess with you. Like that's this trickster God. Like that's not how God operates. I think in any religious context, it's it's no. There's a reason, and it's a reason that's for your own good. Now, it may not be for your own good in the modern world, but actually, I mean, pork is not that good for you.
No.
Bacon is now listed as a cancer-causing carcinogen by the World Health Organization. So, again, how ridiculous are these dietary laws? Our medical science tells us they're actually pretty rational, so maybe we shouldn't make fun of them so much. And again, if you like, so say you were brought up in an Islamic culture and you reject Islam, and then you go and discover bacon and get diabetes and die of a heart attack, it's like, well, you can point to that guy and say it would have been better if he was not an atheist, if he had stayed Muslim. because if he'd stayed Muslim, he would have laid off the pork and he wouldn't have died of diabetes and a massive heart attack. Presumably, he would have had a happier life.
yeah, this is why in our religion, uh, anything that may harm the body is not allowed in our religion in Islam. So
Oh, another thing that backs that up, by
just
the
to
way.
protect to protect the body.
Yeah, well,
Not
and
harm.
now we understand that protecting the body is protecting your mind. Like all of our medical science is telling us more and more and more that our our cognitive functions are more distributed than we thought, and our cognitive health is completely based on our biological health. So, like if you're fat and out of shape, you are not thinking as clearly as you would be and as rationally as you would be if you treated your body with more respect. So, I mean, again,
Yes, and
it's
and and we have a lot of uh, like conversations about this, like and quotes. There are so many quotes in Arabic, not necessarily Islamic, uh, but I've always lived in like Islamic countries or Islamic communities or societies. So they always have quotes about like having a healthy mind is by having a healthy body, or a healthy body results in a healthy mind. In Arabic, it's al-aql al-salim bil-jism salim, which means yeah, a healthy mind by a healthy body.
Yeah.
yeah, and it seems self-evident. It's ancient wisdom, and
Yes.
we in the West rejected it, forgot it, have suffered the consequences for it in the declining health of particularly the North American Western population. In Canada and the United States, our obesity rates are continuing to skyrocket. Diabetes is out of control. And we're also seeing a lowering of um, academic performance. I
Oh yeah,
mean,
dumbest generation in
it,
history.
I mean, and not as a pejorative, but by the test results.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, everything seems to be pointing to the obvious, and it's like, and yet we in the West still
Well, there's
look down our long noses sometimes
well there's
at these other cultures, and it's like, oh, they do this, they do that, and it's like, well, they all look healthy and happy to me. I mean, we're the ones that are killing
yeah.
ourselves.
Well, there's this goes back to our topic of men, are men disposable, right? So I'm gonna circle this around because we're at an hour and 22 minutes.
Yeah,
Um, I want to kind of sum some of this up. So I'm gonna because it's been a very good conversation, and I think there's a bunch of different things we've touched on that I think are really true. Um, I think it's true that fundamentally men are the disposable species of the two in the context of you need to have men to make more people, but you need women to actually make people, right? So they're not really designed for the workload that men take that is also more risky. But there's also a much greater risk in treating men that they're disposable. Because men as a creature, when, or at least I'll use myself, if I don't feel appreciated, I'll find it somewhere else, or I will seek a situation that I will feel appreciated, whether it's at work, whether it's with my mate, whether it's with my friends. So I think that requirement for a man to be necessary is the takeaway. We need to remind our society that disposability of men is a fact of life. But
but it's
when you
kind of
treat,
something to be celebrated. I
yeah,
think
it's to
not
be
because of the
revered
right
as
way.
Jesus said it like this: the greatest thing of all is to lay down your life for a friend or for another.
Well, I mean,
The
I
greatest
said it on one
sacrifice.
of the ones the other night, and I'll say it again. You know, the the future of the Ukraine is being, sure they're using Western weapons, but at the end of the day, all those men fighting are Ukrainian men, and So the future of that country at an existential level, like whether or not it continues to even be a country, is being decided by their fighting men, because the men were forbidden from leaving the country. And it's worth noting that transgender, so biological men presenting as women, were also forbidden from leaving the country. Something that the leftists, who all celebrate what's his name, Zelensky, like to overlook, because it's a little contrary to their narrative. But it's like, well, yeah, because think about it. If you allow any man to simply put on a dress and say, I don't want to fight, then the country that does that's probably going to lose the war. Sorry, you're going to have to go fight. You're a man. You're the one who's. It's not because you're disposable.
It's because you have
Well,
a sausage.
it is because you're disposable, but it's like it's also because you're the one who's made to do that. That's what you're supposed to do. Like, why do you?
Like,
Yeah. Why do
Say
you
that.
think we
What was
like
that,
it? So
Papo?
why do you think we practice it?
like it's a stereotype. Like men are made to fight, to protect, to provide, uh,
To compete, we're made to compete with other men, and
yes,
war is the ultimate competition. I mean, it's also very stupid, but it is, it is what it is. And it at the end of the day, I look at what's going on in the Ukraine, and I just think about the state of like masculinity and the men in this country. And I think like if we're invaded, it's going to be the traditional conservative men
Gen X.
that save us. Well, of any generation, it's just going to be the men that are like conservative and traditional and raised with those values. Probably most of them out in the country, so they also know what to do with a gun. And it just like those are the guys that are going to be saving us. It's not going to be, some soy boy leftist, keyboard warrior
With
living
blue
in the
hair.
city with blue hair who plays video games all day and has less testosterone than his girlfriend. It's not going to be that guy. Unless he can, like, quickly, unless he's really, it turns out he's really good at making drones into bombs, then maybe we can make use of that guy. But probably not, because he's going to hear one gunshot and have a PTSD episode and be useless. Like, it's just, I don't know if I'm much better. I hope I would be better if the time came. I feel like I've kept myself a bit tough, but it really is one of those things where it's like, oh, it's so dramatic. And it's like, yeah, tell that to the Ukraine. You think it's so dramatic until all of a sudden it isn't.
You have to. Yeah. Go ahead,
Yeah, I
Papo.
mean, like I saw a quote from um, Khabib Nurmagomedov's father, who said that, like, who of course is Muslim, because Dagestan is completely Muslim, and he said, like, in the Caucasus, in that region, when all men prepare for war at all points in their life. And he said it's a frequent topic of conversation. We talk about it, like that a man should be prepared for war and violence even in peaceful times. It's just duh. And of course, that region has been like fighting Russia for the past 30 plus years in a violent, ever since the Soviet Union went down and while the Soviet Union was around. So, like, yeah, they're like, we have the luxury in the West of being geographically, difficult to reach. So, you got to cross an ocean to get to us, so we don't have these problems in the same degree. But all this stuff floating over from China, maybe that geographic separation is a memory. It just feels like, like when 9/11 happened, it was like that big wake up call to the United States that terrorism can exist on its own soil, and then all of a sudden started doing stuff at airports. But the rest of Europe and the Arab world and Israel and like everywhere else in the world had been doing airport security for a long time. I mean, we really were just kind of. I think we've been so
Cavalier.
cuddled. We've been so coddled, and I really worry that, like, if we got invaded now, I don't know if our men would be able to put up the same level of fight that the men in the Ukraine are.
So, Beppo, I want to what your final thoughts, and then I'm going to close the show out. Go ahead, buddy.
Uh, well, I'm just gonna be repeating myself by saying that in the end, after the whole discussion, I believe that neither of the genders are disposable. Both of them are important. Both of them have a role in society that have to be completed or done, or uh, it's a job that they have to do in society, both females and males, and uh, they're both a part of raising a child. They're both a part of having an evolution in society. I don't believe that there is any inequality, and that, well, I don't know how to explain it.
Well, it just doesn't sound like it's this. I mean, part of the conversation really has been comparing, like your input's been so great because we're in the West, and I don't think it's something that I've been saying just because I've heard from other people. Like I've been saying to people in the West that I know is like, you don't get it. Like elsewhere in the world, they're we're not convincing them that our way is better. I guess it's the simplest way I can put it. And everything you've said here tonight convinces me more and more that I'm right about that. Like, yeah, we're our it doesn't sound like the Turkey is restructuring itself to make itself more like us because we've been so compelling.
Yeah.
I believe that having morals and ethics will change someone's whole point of view about this topic, disposability of either genders.
Yeah.
Having morals will completely remove any like opinion that you may have and just replace it
It gives you an
with
answer. Yeah.
yeah, it gives you an answer to all those questions about gender inequality.
And and I'm gonna be the last speak, and then I'm gonna stop the recording. The the thing that I took away from the conversation more so than anything is I think the idea that you can compare the value of a man and a woman is the problem, because that's like saying which is more important, air or water. You can't really do that because they're both required. So I think Bappo's right in that assessment that men aren't any more disposable than women, and women aren't any more disposable than men. They both serve an entirely different role and function, and we need to get back to the idea that that role and function should be celebrated across both sides and celebrated vocally and publicly. That it's good to be a man that's productive, that's useful, that's a protector, and then it's also good for a woman to be uh, and I saw it was on Pearl. A guy goes, "What are you looking for?" And he goes, "Modesty." A woman who's soft, and it's like men don't want to be with a woman that's a guy because we're not gay. We want something that's soft, that's fragile, that we can defend, that we can nurture, that we can protect. There's an instinct hardwired into man to be more than or attempt to be more than what they are or could be, and that's generally inspired through whether it be circumstances like extreme. Chris had posted a thing about one of the founders of Macy's that was on the Titanic, and the ship was going down, and the husband said to his wife, "You get on the thing," and she's like, "No, I'm dying with you." And they gave,
Survival, but
yeah, they gave their fur coat to their maid, and they were last seen holding hands as the ship was going down. Like
Well, and he
that's
was
the
given he was given the offer
yeah,
because he was rich, because he was who he was offered a spot on a lifeboat with his wife. He refused the spot because he said that there were still women and children on the ship and he wasn't going to go as long as that was the case. His wife was offered the spot and she said, no, I stay with my husband. So they gave that spot to their maid who survived and they went down with the ship. Yep. And
But
that's to me that's morals right there. That's morals leading to not just good behavior, but great behavior.
yeah. So with that, gentlemen, thank you so much for all of your time.